The Columbia Rotary Club, we're glad you're here. We'll get started with the singing of our national anthem. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Rusty. Catherine Davis will deliver today's invocation.
On that note, let us pray. One of the lessons that can be missed about the life of Jesus is that he welcomed those he meant to believe and have faith. He never required that anyone understand. As a matter of fact, he commented that some wouldn't understand. Belief is what he welcomes. We are daily saddened by the venomous language used in today's political public square, but we know that you, Lord, give us no earthly encounter that heaven cannot cure. And so today, and in this moment, we as Rotarians seek peace and understanding, as did Martin Luther King. And I pray that we receive our speaker's message by going into that silent space where we know deeply that prayer changes things, and where the meditations of our hearts are treated not just with tender loving care, but equally. We ask, O Lord, that you hear our prayers, that you open our ears so that we may hear the words of our esteemed guest, former Governor Martin Omalley of Maryland, now a candidate for the President of the United States. We pray, O Lord, for the ability to put aside partisan differences that will enable us to hear and understand his true message to the people of South Carolina, and most of all, to today's special gathering of the Columbia Rotary Club. We believe that every one of us is purposefully here for a reason, and that we are going to honor and respect each other with all our might, no matter what. We don't have to understand each other to believe in each other. So now, unto whom he who is ever able to keep us from falling, bless us. Bless us to enable our eyes and our ears to function in accordance with Columbia Rotary Club principles. We also pray that our food is blessed, as are those who prepared it for us today. In your blessed name of Jesus I pray. Amen.
Amen. You may be seated. Thank you, Catherine. That was a lovely prayer. I'll invite Joe Jones to come forward. As he's making his way up here, let me remind all of you that the cart bucket on each table is how we raise money to support Alzheimer's research. So if you would, each of you reach into your pockets and put some money in the cart bucket today. I sure appreciate it. And here's Joe Jones.
Thank you. We're at that point in our program today in which we have one of the four-way tenets of the Rotary test of how do the things that we think, say, or do affect others. And that is number 3, which will it build goodwill and develop friendships. And on that note, I'd like to ask you to stand and shake hands with somebody that's near you, that you are your table.
Hey! Hello! Yeah. We have thanks. Yeah, that's the fourth one. Play along.
Rusty asked me to come forward, and while he's on the way, we have no visiting Rotarians from in town today, but we have a number of guests. So those of you who have guests, would you please stand and would we give a round of ovation, round of and what's the word? Applause for each of our guests today. Would you stand and let me recognize you?
Thank you, Joe. My name is Andrew Clarkson. I'm pleased to have with me my wife, Caroline. She's a second grade educator at San Lambert Elementary.
Welcome.
I'm Wade Carlisle, and I have as my guest Edie Willard.
I'm Wes Hickman, and I have as my guest today my wife Megan, and she's the Executive Director of Ingenuity SC and a partner at Sagacious Partners.
I'm Ted Creech, and I have as my guest today Antoine Seawright, CEO of Sunrise Communications.
I'm Robert Goins, and President Mark and I have a guest, Brent Skinner. Brent owns BP Skinner, a very, very nice, fine men's store in the Vista. We're proud to have him. He's a great guy.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Hallback, and I'm happy to have as my guest Patty Dodd-Lois, who is a friend and is retired from DHEC.
I'm Adam Jordan. I'm glad to have Robert Feinstein with me here today. Robert is the Acting Deputy Chief Investment Officer for the South Carolina Retirement System.
My name is John Dozier, and I have with me my neighbor and friend, Elizabeth Marks. She owns Elizabeth Marks and Associates Marketing and Advertising firm here in Columbia.
I'm Carrie Powers, and today I have with me Charlie Nutt. He's the owner and publisher of Free Times. He's my former boss, and he'll be joining our club soon, and I'm very glad to have him here.
Charlie and Kate, and I have a guest. Charlie, would you introduce our guest?
Be happy to, Joe.
Oh, sorry.
I have Lieutenant General retired Air Force, Buck Schuler.
Buck and I were at Sudbury together. I was a year ahead of him. He says I chewed him out, but I can't believe that I did that to General. Buck had a distinguished Air Force career. He was commander of the 8th Air Force and one of the founding fathers of the 8th Air Force Museum in Savannah. To all of our guests, thank you very much for coming today, and we hope you will come back.
Thank you, Joe. I'll call forward John Dozier. John is bringing us this week's Health and Happiness Report.
Thank you, President Mark. Today, for health and happiness, I will tell you, you posed a great challenge to me today in the sense that no one wanted to tell me anything other than the fact that you're healthy and happy, which I'm fine with because I have a wild card in my pocket, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. However, I do have this one item. Carrie Powers, her daughter is performing in Dr. Dolittle over at Village Square Theater. Tickets are on sale. Village Square Theater, of course, is located over in Lexington. You can get your tickets at villagesquaretheater.com. So the wild card. Wild card is the fact that there's a birthday that's today, and I get to announce it. It actually belongs to someone who's turning 50, or who has turned 53 today, and just so happens also to be our esteemed guest speaker, Governor Martin Omalley. Happy birthday. Governor Omalley, Rusty, are you, hit it.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Martin. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Rusty. I wasn't going to ask us to sing. I have all the faith in the world of Rusty's playing ability, but our singing sometimes is suspect. And I didn't really want to put us out there that way, but it sounded great, you guys. I appreciate you. Today we celebrate Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birth. I will tell you that in 1968, when he passed, I wasn't even a twinkling in my parents' eyes. Yet that day is as seared in my memory as it could be for those of you who were there. It's seared because my parents were strong advocates of teaching me the history of the civil rights movement. And I reflect on this day. I use this day as a day not only to remember Martin Luther King and his legacy, but as a day also to reflect on those moments, those years that led to his death. You see, Dr. Martin Luther King was only 39 years old when he passed. And in 1968, only 3 years prior, and 4 years prior, we had just passed the Civil Rights Act. To that point, Jim Crow law ruled our land. And I think we're only 48 years past his death. And although Jim Crow is long gone, and although we have made great strides and great progress, there is still great work for us to do. And so I use this day again to reflect, to think on the past, where we have been, to have conversations with my colleagues and friends so that we all understand one another, so that we can build a future together. And I think about that even in terms of the many quotes that come from Dr. Martin Luther King, my favorite being that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good. We at Rotary have service as a charge. Service is at our heart. And I know that each one of you work daily to ensure that that service is towards bettering our communities. Yet we still continue to have much work to do. And we cannot stand on the sidelines when injustices are happening. We must stand in the gap and make sure that those injustices are eradicated. So I stand here with you commemorating the special day of a special man that was taken far too early. He would have been 87 years old today. I reflect on his memory, and I hope that you do too. But I also, in your reflections, hope that you keep an eye towards the future and think about how we can make this a better environment, not only for African Americans, but for our Latino brothers and sisters, for our Muslim brothers and sisters, for our Jewish brothers and sisters, for all of the people who have no voice. I hope that you stand in the gap. Thank you for this opportunity today.
I've asked past President Hal Stevenson to make an announcement. He has some exciting news to share with you all.
Thank you, President Mark. This club, as you know, is going to be celebrating its 100th anniversary, I think in December of this year, under President John Bates' watch. Over the years, this club has been the preeminent Rotary Club. being able to get speakers like Governor O'Malley is something that this club is able to do, continues to be an important institution in the community. And we have an opportunity for our annual address from President Pastides at USC for us to go over to the Alumni Center and have a meeting off-site. For you guys that are new members, this is not anything new that we've done. A couple of years ago, we went through an actual search of venues and went off campus. It gets a little bit, some people show up here anyway until they forget that we were going. But even before that, we've had meetings at the zoo where Satch Krantz would put on a little party for us to go. We've gone off a good bit. And I think it's very important for us as we get out and continue to grow this organization and be really about what John just talked about in his health and happiness, a place where people gather, men, women, white, black, Republican, Democrat, independents, different religions. It's a great thing about Rotary is we can be ourselves individually, but the thing that we embrace, what Joe talked a little bit about in his introduction, the four-way test of building better friendships. And I think especially at this time as we're dealing with an intense political season, the idea of respect for other people's views is something that is a unique part of Rotary that makes it really worth doing. So we want you to continue to invite people, and we want to use this opportunity. We're going to be at their beautiful new facility. We got a lot of comments from our Christmas party out there where people wanted to go back over there again. We thought this would be a good opportunity to hear the President speak, for us to invite our friends to come. I think it'll be a very nice, well put on opportunity where Jesse Bullard with Southern Way, one of our members, is the caterer over there. So we're really putting the pressure on him to put on the dog. But if you would put it on your calendars now, we're going to do it on February 29th. Obviously the only day of the year that's in part of leap year, so I mean that ought to be easy to remember. On February 29th, we are going to meet at the USC Alumni Center. For those of you that came to the Christmas party, you know the routine of getting into the garage, and I'm sure we'll bring more specific detail as we get closer to that. But begin to invite people now. There's been a lot of changes at the university, obviously, this year, and we want Harris to come, our fellow Rotarian Harris Postides, to bring us a great address that day. So put it on your calendar. Great. Thank you.
Much more to come on that. We've got 5 or 6 weeks to plan, but we're all excited to take a trip and have a luncheon at the Alumni Center, February 29th. So more to follow on that. And with that, we'll now turn it to Eddie Greenleaf to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Mark. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Throughout his 53 years and his 15 years of executive experience, Martin Omalley has established himself as a principled and progressive leader, eager to solve big problems facing communities. As a member of Baltimore City Council, then as the Mayor of Baltimore, and finally as Governor of Maryland, Governor O'Malley brought people together to get things done. As governor, he raised the minimum wage, froze college tuition, passed the DREAM Act, and invested in public education to make Maryland's public schools #1 in the country for 5 years in a row. No matter the role, Governor O'Malley has always put working families first and fought for the American dream. Please join me in a warm Rotary welcome to Governor Martin O'Malley.
Thank you all very, very much. I was sitting out on the steps of your State House all morning. Boy, was it cold. So it really feels good to be with all of you. And my ears are just starting to thaw a little bit. So, look, I want to thank you for the honor of being able to share a couple thoughts with you. And thank you for your kind introduction. and also the really beautiful words on this Martin Luther King Day. And I know this is, and I thank you for allowing me to be here on this day. Boy, my mother knew what she was doing, didn't she? That my birthday would coincide with the Martin Luther King holiday in a year when I was running for election as President of the United States and visiting South Carolina. Mom had that one all timed out. I want to share a few thoughts with you. And I was listening to some of the conversation, and as I've spent a lot of time lately, mostly in Iowa. And in fact, we do a parody of the Johnny Cash song. Sometimes guitars come out of nowhere, and I do the I've Been Everywhere Man, except it goes, been to Iowa, 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 Iowa. That's what you have to do when you start off and you're a virtual unknown, just as Jimmy Carter or John Kerry or others. But the people of Iowa always have a way of shaking things up on caucus night, and usually lifting up a new leader that the rest of the country has never heard of. So these are exciting times for me and my family and for our country. But one of the recurring questions that people ask again and again and again, and when you campaign out there, you jump up on a chair, you give the talk, and then you do Q&A for 30 or 40 minutes. One of the questions that comes up again and again and again is this one. How are you going to heal the divisions in our country? Sometimes said in a different way, how are you going to work with this Congress? Or how are you going to bring us together? And I do believe that on this King holiday, maybe there's an appropriate time to kind of go deep and try to search for some deeper understanding that precedes action, because these are very divided times in our country. And nobody's going to come in from another planet and heal these divisions. We have to do it ourselves. And this organization, the work that all of you do to move our economy forward, what you do in your own businesses, all of this is part of the fabric of our country. So let me share with you a few thoughts. I want to talk with you about our story, the story of us, the United States. I want to share with you my story, and then share with you what I believe we need to do as a country in order to move forward again. And then let's open it up to Q&A, all right? And as we say in Iowa, and if you have any answers, I'd like you to raise your hand first, because I want to search for answers. I want to thank Rusty DePass for his outstanding piano playing, and that was the best version of the Star Spangled Banner I have heard today. And Rusty, I come from Baltimore, Maryland, land of the free and home of the brave. And a lot of us have sung that song again and again and again at baseball games. But I want to share with you just briefly the true story behind it, because it does kind of point to our solidarity and unity as a people. You know, that song comes from a true story. It's some people sing that song and think maybe it's about a fireworks show. But no, it's a true story. And it happened in the War of 1812. Washington had been burned to the ground by the British Army and Navy. The President and his cabinet were scattered to the winds. And the people of Baltimore could see the glow in the skies to our south from the flames of Washington. And then we knew that they were coming for us. The British general at the time said rather notoriously, I'm going to march on Baltimore. I'm going to dine there. Because even then, man, we had great restaurants. And then I'm going to burn Baltimore to the ground. But the people of Baltimore, rather than running away, even though they didn't have the federal government to back them up, instead of running away, they dug trenches. Black and white people together. Baltimore at the time had the largest African-American population of any city in colonial America at the time. 1/5 of the defenders were black citizens. Half of the defenders were immigrants, who were the sons and daughters of first-generation immigrants. And rather than running away, they held their ground, and after a 26-hour bombardment, they hoisted that giant Star-Spangled Banner. True story behind that banner. It was actually sewn together in the home of Mary Pickersgill and her daughters. But one of the people in her household was an African-American indentured servant girl named Grace Wisher. And I thought oftentimes as I hear our anthem about that image, of black and white hands stitching together the stars and stripes. And I would submit to you that the thread that held that flag together then is the same thread that holds us together now. And it is the thread of human dignity, our belief in one another, the dignity of neighbor helping neighbor, the dignity of place and home, and yes, country. You see, you and I share and are a part of a self-creating and living mystery called the United States of America. But the promises at the heart of that mystery is actually a very, very concrete thing. And it is the covenant among us and between us that says, in our country, you start where you start, but through your hard work, you should be able to get ahead. Now call that an economy that works for all of us. Call it a country that works for us. Call it the American dream. It is the actions put into motion in every generation to include more people more fully in the economic, social, and political life of our nation that has earned us the brand, worldwide, of being the land of opportunity. I'm running for President of the United States because, quite frankly, our brand is on the ropes in a lot of places in our country. The great poet laureate of the American dream, Bruce Springsteen, once asked, is a dream a life that don't come true, or is it something worse? We've come a long way since the crash of 2008, when unbridled, unrestrained recklessness on Wall Street wrecked our American Main Street economy. People, businesses, homes lost through no fault of their own. And we're coming back now as a country, thanks to all of you. I mean, we've created now 70 months in a row of positive month-over-month job growth. That hasn't happened for a long time. But when you talk to your neighbors, it's hard to find a whole lot of optimism about the future out there, isn't it? I mean, I sometimes ask for a show of hands as a barometer until Chris Christie stole it from me. I stopped doing this. You know, Chris Christie recognizes a good question when he hears it anyway. But I oftentimes ask the question, how many of you believe very firmly you've enjoyed a better quality of life than your parents and grandparents? Raise your hand if that's true for you. How many of you believe you've enjoyed a better quality of life than your parents and grandparents? Okay. Second question. How many of you believe just as firmly your children and grandchildren will enjoy a better future? Raise your hands. And that's the question on the center of our table of democracy. How are we going to fix that? Because for the first time, this side of World War II, 70% of us are earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago. And that's not the way our country's supposed to work, and that's not the way our economy is supposed to work. And nobody else is going to fix this for us. Here in South Carolina, since 2000, median income has actually declined by $7,000 per family, from $51,000 down to $44,000. The size of your middle class has shrunk from about 51% of your state's population to 44%, and that's bad for business. When 70% of economic growth comes from consumer demand, that's not good for business. So let me share with you a couple thoughts about what I believe we need to do about this. My background is not of a United States Senator, and it's not a cabinet secretary. I'm an executive. I was a governor and I was a mayor. I had no room in our budgets, either at the municipal level or the state level, for ideology. We believed in bringing people together to do the things that work to achieve better results. And Ed mentioned some of them. In the middle of a recession, when other states tried to cut their way to prosperity, we said, hell no. We're going to practice that fair market American capitalism that actually invests more in our children's potential, and so we did. Made our schools number one, went 4 years in a row without a penny's increase in college tuition. We invested more in our infrastructure, water, wastewater, transportation infrastructure. Roads are important, right? We also did a number of other things as well. We made it easier for people to vote instead of harder. Passed marriage equality, passed the DREAM Act, raised the minimum wage, passed the living wage. And after doing those things, we defended all the way through the recession, not only a AAA bond rating, but the highest median income of any state in America, and the second highest median income for African American families. We created a faster rate of job growth coming out of the recession than our neighbors in Virginia or Pennsylvania. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which hardly ever says nice things about Democratic governors anywhere, named us the #1 state in America for 3 years in a row for innovation and entrepreneurship. So what does that have to do with the here and now in this run for president? Look, all of you have a weighted responsibility. There are, as in every year, there are only human beings running for president. And you get to pick one of them to lead us forward. This is what I believe. I believe that our economy is not money. Our economy is people. It's all of our people. And therefore, we must take again the actions as our parents and grandparents took to make sure that we restore common sense wage and labor policies. Things that we used to do as Democrats and Republicans routinely, like always keeping the minimum wage above the poverty line for a family for a family of two. We've gotten away from that. Making good on the promise of equal pay for equal work for men and women. Getting 11 million of our neighbors out of the underground shadow economy by passing comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. All of these things and others are things like minority and women business inclusion through our procurement laws. These are the things that allow wages to go up. Secondly, no great country ever created generational wealth or opportunity by locking cash in a closet. We invest in the things that pay a dividend over generations, like affordable college. I mean, my dad went to college on a GI Bill, flew 33 missions over Japan in a B-24 Liberator. My daughters went to college, one of them to Charleston, College of Charleston. Not on the GI Bill, but on a mountain of bills. Their mother and I were very proud of them on graduation day, and we're going to be proud every month for the rest of our natural lives. You have to laugh because it hurts too much to cry. But it doesn't need to be that way. John Kennedy said that to govern is to choose. We've chosen now to saddle our kids with the mountain of debt like we never ever did before. And that too is a drag on our economy. I put forward a plan to move us to debt-free college again within the next 5 years. These are the investments we make: R&D, research and infrastructure, the education of our children. And third and finally, let me touch on the great challenges of our times. And there are many. We need a new foreign policy of engagement and collaboration. We need a better and more nimble and far-seeing and national security strategy of threat reduction. But we also need to address another great challenge of our time, and that is the challenge of climate change, which I believe is the greatest business opportunity to come to the United States of America in 100 years. And that is why I've put forward a plan to move us to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050 and create 5 million jobs along the way. We did not land a man on the moon with an all-of-the-above strategy. And an all-of-the-above strategy will not lead us to 100% clean electric grid by 2050. But our ingenuity will, our know-how will, the diversity that is our strength can. And so these are among 15 strategic goals I have laid out to rebuild the truth of the American dream we share, to move our country forward, to make ourselves stronger here at home. So, because that's really what it's all about. Our foreign policy, our national security, it all depends on our being stronger here at home. What credibility can our system, our free and fair market capitalism have in the world? What credibility can that have if our cities are tearing themselves apart? I mean, how can we hold our heads high and say that we're the land of opportunity if our middle class is shrinking and wages are declining? Nothing works very well in our country if wages decline. But everything works in our country if people who work hard can actually get ahead. So we have work to do. You know, my parents were part of that generation that Tom Brokaw dubbed the greatest generation. But they would never take that title upon themselves, and you all know people like that. Because they taught my 6 brothers and sisters and me that every generation has a responsibility to do great things for their country. It's only by making our country stronger we're able to give our kids a better future. They taught us to love God, to love our family, and yes, to love our country. To believe that we're all in this together, and to understand that we have to help each other if we're going to succeed. That's the America I carry in my heart. And I bet you that's the America you carry in your heart as well. There's nothing so divided about our nation's politics that it cannot be healed. With new leadership and with a renewed faith in one another. We are a great people. Our best days are still ahead of us. We are on the threshold of a new era of American progress. We just simply need to walk over that threshold and move forward again. Thank you all very, very much. And now the fun part. You got to be wary of the guy that shoots up his hand first, especially if he's sitting next to the piano player. Yes, sir.
Having been the mayor of Baltimore and the governor of Maryland, you should have a unique insight. Can you comment or explain to us the state of race relations in Baltimore and Maryland?
Sure. I mean, as best I can, as best one human being can. I mean, this is, we're on a constant search for this one as Americans, aren't we? Let me share with you a little bit. This is what I believe is happening in our country. That Wall Street crash of 2008 hurt all of us. There was no state that was immune from that. But it also hurt disproportionately poor people and people of color. And some of the worst entrenched structural unemployment that we have in America is in the heart of America's cities. And so in many cities, Baltimore, Los Angeles still, I think, Chicago until just last month, unemployment's higher now than it was 8 years ago. And that creates a pool of kerosene on the ground of anger and frustration. And people know that this is a national phenomenon, and they hear politicians oftentimes saying, hey, we've recovered, our economy has recovered, and people feel like they're not being seen, that they're unneeded, they're unwanted, and that their own leaders don't appreciate the fact that it hasn't recovered for them. With that economic backdrop, then we have now the advent of cell phone technology, so there are videos everywhere. And if we're under 30, we actually know how to use them, right? And so we're seeing pictures of police-involved shootings, some of them pretty horrific things, like the Walter Scott shooting when an officer shoots a man fleeing from him in the back and kills him. And that creates the spark on that kerosene, if you will, that can erupt. And so we've allowed ourselves now as a nation to reach a point we haven't since the Gilded Age. With the concentration, whenever you concentrate, we have concentrated wealth and power so much in the hands of so few that it's literally taking opportunity out of the homes of the many. When any nation reaches that point, there's only two paths forward, history tells us. One is a sensible rebalancing based on the common good we share, and the other is pitchforks or rocks. That night the Baltimore erupted after Freddie Gray, after that death, for a lot of us who love our city, that was a heart-wrenching and heartbreaking night. That night I realized my country is Baltimore, and Baltimore is my country. And honestly, it was that night that compelled me to make this candidacy and to make this offering. I can't not try when I see my country in so many ways in danger of tearing herself apart. The good news is, though, that we know what we need to do about it. Well, we've had these places before, and we haven't had an agenda for American cities in some 40 years. But there are some things that we can do and that we must do in order to get our people back to work. And part of that is rebuilding our infrastructure. Part of that is doing the sort of retrofits in our cities. And that's the great work of our times. So that's what I believe is going on in our country right now, I think, and would welcome any thoughts you all might have. Yes, sir.
What do you think of Charleston last night?
What did I think of Charleston?
Last night.
You mean the debate? I enjoyed the debate. It was my fourth time at this rodeo, so they don't tell you the disclaimer before the debate that 80 or 90% of the questions go to the front runner, front runners rather, and then they tell challengers that you're going to have to jump in if you want to jump in. And then you have to figure out how to do that without looking like a jerk about it. So I thought we did very well last night. I enjoyed it, and I love Charleston. What a beautiful city. My daughter went there for 3 years to college at Charleston. Her mom and I love coming down here and visiting. Yes, sir.
You spoke a little bit about the drags on the economy. Could you elaborate a little bit about national debt and how that stacks up on your priorities of things that need attention?
Yeah, thank you. And what is your name?
Mike.
Michael, thank you. Yeah, when I was, I'm the only person on the stage of the 3 Democrats running for president who's actually balanced the budget. And in fact, even with Baltimore, when I ran for mayor of Baltimore in 1999, it wasn't because things were going well. We had allowed ourselves to become the most violent, addicted, and abandoned city. And as you might imagine, when people left, they didn't leave behind them an annuity to help run city services. But we put our city on a path for the biggest crime reduction in America over the next 10 years. Her population's growing now. She's a much more resilient city than she was. But early on, we had to make the investment in public safety, and we had to balance the budget, and we still were able to get an upgrade in our bond rating. And then as governor, I cut our budget by more than any governor in Maryland history. Probably any governor can say that if he or she were serving during the recession. But we also made record investments in some of those other things I mentioned. So I like math. I think math is important. And this is what I see in our national debt. Our national debt, I believe, is primarily fueled by fighting a protracted war, one of them on false pretenses, the invasion of Iraq, and not asking our people to pay for it at the same time. So we charged all of that to debt, all of that to the credit card. So that debt soared. And we need to get it down, and we need to get it down over time. And the best way to get it down, I believe, is to make our economy grow. President Obama has actually, not that he gets any credit for this, but he's actually reduced annual deficit spending to lows that it hasn't seen for years and years and years. But ultimately, we're going to have to reduce that debt, even as we make the investments we must in our country's future, which then leads to your second question. How are you going to pay for these things that you want to do? I believe that, I know for a fact, that in Ronald Reagan's first term, the highest marginal income tax rate was 70%. It's now, what, like 38, 39? I believe that if we and I said this the other night, last night I think in Charleston, I think there's one big entitlement we can no longer afford as a nation any longer. And that is the entitlement that many of us who make more than $1 million feel that we are entitled to pay a much lower marginal rate than historically we have over the course of the last century. If we did 2 things, one of them would be to raise the highest marginal rate on those making more than $1 million to 45%. And the other would be, for the most part, to tax capital gains at the same rate that we tax earnings from hard work and sweat and toil. That would generate $800 billion conservatively over the next 10 years. And that would go a long way, not only to paying down the debt, but also to making the investments that would create more opportunity in our country and allow wages to go up again in our nation. That's my theory. Thank you.
I'm very intrigued with Jack's question about the difference in what happened and transpired in Baltimore to cause the reaction to be so severe. Your explanation keyed in on the economic impact that the lower income have had. Yet when we look at what happened in Charleston, South Carolina, we had a stark different response to what happened there. Several things that happened there with the church and with the young person getting shot in the back. No rioting in the streets, people came together. Is there any, and frankly I think the economic impact in Charleston is probably just as hard as Baltimore, maybe worse in some ways. Is there any value to the people in Maryland taking a look at the people in South Carolina and collaborating on what we're doing that seems to be working over the rest of the nation?
Yeah, we can all learn from one another. Each one of these incidents is very different, and leadership is an indispensable variable in all of these things. I was not mayor or governor at the time that the Freddie Gray incident happened. And there was never any unrest of that scale while I was mayor or while I was governor. And there's no doubt an after action that we'll look back on this, and a lot of questions will be asked about how it was allowed to scale up. Some of them are related to, and some of them related to the police response, others related to whether bus service should have been cut off or not to the school when they got inkling that the kids were angry and were going to do something after school. But another part of it is, when I was mayor, as you might imagine, Baltimore's a majority African American city. And so when I ran in 1999, the issue that year for the election was how are we going to turn around our violent crime problem? Because we'd become the most violent city in America. There wasn't a day that went by, therefore, when we weren't talking about the intertwined issues of race and public safety. I was the only white candidate in that race. I had 2 African American opponents. And so I promised in the course of that election to not only improve how we, police response to poor neighborhoods where sadly we had allowed open-air drug markets to take over whole swaths of our city, but I also promised I'd improve how we police our police. And so we created a civilian review board. We gave them their own detectives. We started doing 100 integrity stings a year. We published our discourtey, our excessive force, use of lethal force complaints. I drove fatal police-involved shootings down to 3 of the 4-year record, 3 of the 4 lowest years on record. And we made sure that we had adequate staffing in our internal affairs division. And even in our drive to push back on the open-air drug markets, that was a very collaborative thing. There was never a night when I wasn't out in our poorest neighborhoods, so people felt they had accountability. They felt they could always see their mayor. And the police knew that the mayor was always in poor neighborhoods. A lot of that stuff stopped happening. And when those things stopped happening in successive administrations, it wasn't out of malice, but that stuff's hard work, and it can be embarrassing when police fail integrity stings, and you got to step up. But if you don't, people lose trust in their police, and the relationship start to fray. And sadly, that started happening in our city. Contrary to some of the myth that it was a high level of arrests, actually arrests in Baltimore had fallen to a 38-year low the year before Freddie Gray's death. So, but community and police relationships had frayed in successive administrations. In retrospect, I go back and scratch my head and wonder what I might have been able to do better to institutionalize some of the things that we had done. But we should all learn from each other, and I put forward a new agenda for criminal justice reform that's informed not only by my experience as mayor, but also I drove incarceration rates down to 20-year lows, drove violent crime down to 30-year lows as governor, and also we did a number of other things like cutting our recidivism rate by 15%. But yes, we can all learn from each other. I'm going to be less long-winded because I know we're out of here, right? You hit the bell at 1:30. So let's do the lightning round. I promise I will keep it short. And if you keep it short, I'll keep it short. We'll get a few in.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering.
What's your name?
My name is Wade. Sorry.
Wade, thank you.
And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the press coverage of, Baltimore and Ferguson and so on and so forth. Do you think that they've been fair, or do you think that they've been one-sided in one regard or the other?
I found their coverage, we've got to be careful here. I think that, sometimes, no, I don't think it's unfair.
Thank you.
And I think that this 24/7 news cycle can list and fall into tabloid entertainment, even when covering very tragic and real events. And so no, I did not think it was fair. I almost got the impression that they were disappointed Baltimore didn't have a second bad night.
Sure.
They stayed all week. And, somebody else? Come on, we have some more uplifting questions here for crying out loud. There's more that unites us than divides us.
All right, so I guess my question is about the idea of climate and improvement.
Yes, sir.
About building a new technology-based, clean electric grid, is that kind of getting to not being as dependent on the combustion engine, I guess, is?
Yeah, my plan doesn't go into the transportation sector as much as I'm thinking the electric grid. But there's certainly innovations and things.
I guess what I'm trying to think about is like, it seems like a lot of the lobbying for oil and coal, those bigger businesses tend to dictate what some people say on TV and in the debates and stuff. I feel like how on the electric side of things, would you be impacted differently by some of those lobbying bases and some of those bigger businesses? They're not a good friend of yours because you're going in the opposite direction, I guess.
Yeah, it'll still be a challenge. Look, it's a challenge, but it's one that we have to rise to and that we have to meet. In my own state, we greatly dialed up our renewable portfolio. We decoupled the consumption motive, so that utilities got paid more for the maintenance of the grid, rather than how much energy you use or how much coal they burn to produce the energy. And that's where all of this is. That's where I see this moving. I think we're getting away from the old days where all of the electricity is produced in one place, then goes out and is used at its endpoint, and instead it's going to be a much more dynamic flow. It's going to mean a whole new sort of built environment, net zero homes, and buildings that produce more energy than they consume. I think with a big play here in research and development, the questions, I mean, when I'm in Iowa, get this, 35% of their electricity now comes from wind. And 15 years ago, that wasn't so. And it employs 5,000 people in the state of Iowa, which has 4 congressional districts. How many congressional districts you all have? 7. 7. So, so that's 5,000 people. And so the wind, the solar, those technologies are here. The ones that aren't quite here, though, is the battery technology that we need to fast forward. Some promising things there. It won't happen by itself. And also, what will be the next generation of nuclear? Will it be the pebble bed? Will it be the molten salt? Something's got to replace that, what's now somewhat clean baseload, although there's waste dumps behind each of these places. So these are the combinations of things, and I think utilities will increasingly, I think, make their money by maintaining that dynamic grid in good repair, and that's where I see it going. Yes, sir?
What is your position on the Syrian refugees?
I am in favor of, I was the first candidate to say we should accept the 65,000 Syrian refugees who are fleeing genocide. I mean, they're fleeing ISIL. I also know that we put them through a pretty excruciating background check. It's not going to happen anytime soon. I met with members of the Chaldean Christian community who were bemoaning just how many months, or maybe a year and a half, that it takes to do the background checks. But I am in favor of accepting the Syrian refugees. In a nation of 320 million people, making room for 65,000 refugees is akin to a baseball stadium with 32,000 people, making room for 6.5 more. So the second we start slamming our door in the face of refugees fleeing violence and genocide is the second I think we stop being Americans.
All right, the governor's going to stick around for a few minutes if you'd like to come shake his hand, and we will close by singing.